Christmas vacation is ending for members of Congress. They're coming back to DC to start negotiating. There have been some interesting developments over the holidays, though, while they were gone. Former Speaker of the House McCarthy vacated his seat early. We had a retirement. House Republican announced their retirement. And then Congressman Steve Scalise, another House Republican, is seeking medical treatment and won't be back in the House until February sometime. So you put all this together, and basically House Republicans are operating with a one-seat majority in the House. Democrats have a bare 3-seat majority in the Senate, but appropriations bills take 60 votes, so they need to pick up 9 Republicans over in the Senate. And you've got a Democrat in the White House whose poll numbers seem to be sinking daily with external events, that's things that are happening. So my question at this point, and I don't even know if there's an answer to this, but I find myself scratching my head, who's got the leverage when it comes to deal making and all these negotiations that Congress needs to complete to get the appropriations process done this year, and send money to Israel if they want, or send money to the Ukraine, or fix the border. All this requires legislation. Who's got the leverage at this point, given these thin majorities and weaknesses on all sides?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm not sure there's an answer either. I will say that even before the House Republican majority started shrinking a little bit further with the events that you mentioned, also the expulsion of George Santos, which will, that special election, I think, will happen in February, but that is a competitive race in the way that some of these other ones aren't. I think that we saw that even by the middle of last summer, that the House Republican Conference did not have a lot of leverage because they were having trouble moving their own appropriations bills. They struggled to do that over the summer. They ultimately did it with some of them in September, but it was really hard. And it's because that their majority was slim then, and they started sort of losing members variously on the right end or the left end of their conference. And so we reached a point where you sort of combine the fact that it was getting difficult for them to pass the bills, let alone difficult for them to approve the rules for debate. So the sort of procedural motion that comes before the ultimate bill, they were losing votes on those, which never happens to a majority party. That is exceedingly rare in the modern era. And then you add in the fact that you have a couple of members on the House Rules Committee, which is the panel that ultimately sends things to the floor for consideration, who themselves were put on that committee as a part of a deal with then Speaker McCarthy to get elected Speaker, who are very conservative and who have said that they are unwilling to advance some of these kinds of compromise measures. And so you get to a point where now I think things of consequence in the House, including a possible deal here, are going to have to move on what we call the suspension calendar. So we're going to have to move potentially with a 2/3 vote in the House. That's how they kept the government open in September. So you sort of combine that with the fact that in the Senate, you need 60 votes. And so what I think we're driving to here is some sort of big bipartisan compromise, though probably not one that anyone is especially excited about. And if I were to say sort of really who has influence, I do think the sort of persistence of a bipartisan kind of core in the Senate that wants to get appropriations bills done, wants more defense spending, and is nominally willing to take, at least roughly equivalent non-defense spending to get that done. So this is sort of what's embodied in kind of a agreement made by Susan Collins and Patty Murray, who are the top appropriators in the Senate. Like, that maybe is where there's still some leverage, but I don't really know is the short answer.
It's interesting, though, because I know for the longest time, House members always just used to look at the Senate and bang their heads against the wall about this need to get 60 votes in the Senate to get anything done, because you got to end debate, cut out, got to invoke cloture with 60 votes. I think the House is now getting a taste of what it's like when you have to work on a bipartisan basis, because if they're going to do anything on the suspension calendar, House Republicans are going to need Democratic support. So they're going to have to write bills that have bipartisan support, just like the Democrats in the Senate have to write legislation that gets Republican support, right?